Welcome to the DevReady Podcast, where we're helping non-techs build better tech. Today we're joined by Ronsley Vaz. He's the founder of Amplify. They're a podcasting agency and audio agency, marketing agency, one of the first or the first in Australia. Ronsley, thanks for joining us.
Hey, good to be here, Andrew. We've definitely been through the tech rigmarole at the start of this podcast.
The joys of the home podcast, over a remote web. So it works, but sometimes things don't work.
Correct.
Now, in terms of who is Ronsley? So tell us a bit about yourself, your background, and how you sort of ventured into the world of podcasting.
Well, here's the thing. I would rather not talk about myself because there's enough podcasts about Ronsley, his story, and all that kind of stuff. And you know what? To be honest, it's just an entrepreneur trying to do his thing. That's it. It's literally one step in front of the other, trying to figure it out. And realizing that there's this personal growth journey that comes with entrepreneurship. And I'm learning all the time. And I think one of the things that I feel like every time I learn something, I learn that I know so much less than what I actually thought I knew. And now Amplify, is a company that is we've got so many team members, but when we started, I did everyone's job, right? But now when I see what they're doing, they are leaps and bounds. I can't even keep up. And I have a master's of software engineering. So it's like they're, changing stuff that I don't even understand at this point. But at one point I did the bare minimum and try to get a podcast agency going. So, I just think I'm an artist that has shiny ball syndrome, and I just go after one shiny object after the other, really.
Isn't that the joys of entrepreneurship? I think that's can be one of the joys and challenges of being in this space. You're trying to go after that shiny new thing, and we get sucked into it and pulled away from what's working sometimes. And we can all get pulled into that.
100%. Yeah.
I'll take it you're not a process-driven guy by the sound of it.
It's funny you say that. I mean, I wrote my thesis on process quality. I took 2 companies to ISO 9001. It's so funny that you say that. I'm not a process guy, but yeah, I mean, I like process. I don't love process. I like process. But I think that process allows me to be creative as well. I think there's an element there that is misunderstood, and probably we think that it's black or white, but it is actually a mixture of both, because having process and having structure and having routines, I'm a sucker for routines. I just finished 75 hard at the end of last year, and I started 75 hard phase 1 this year. Just finished phase 1 I don't know, a week ago maybe.
That's Andy Frisella's stuff, right?
Correct. Failed 4 times in phase 1. The 30 days became 3 months. But, I think that all those routines, including putting content out, including interviewing, including having these conversations, all those are routines that allow the creative brain to do its cool stuff when you're not doing anything. But I think we feel like it's one or the other, but I think there's a mixture of both, if that makes sense.
The constraints that are placed upon you from a process allow you to try and figure out how to improve that process. I think so. That's where the creativity sort of comes from, and allows you, even though that is contained and there is a process, you're always trying to improve it. So that's where the creativity area is.
Yeah, I feel like when people think of creativity, they think of someone just sitting in a room and just doing nothing, or just doing whatever the fuck they want, really. And that's not necessarily the case. When you think about someone being creative, they have done lots of reps. They have practiced a muscle long enough that they can just be in flow in that time to create. And there's this lovely balance of artistry and business that comes together with entrepreneurship, I think. And I feel like there's either the artist that has to learn to be the entrepreneur, or the entrepreneur that, the business owner, or the business owner that has to learn to be the artist, because you can't like get into everything and say, I'm only going to do this if there's an ROI. And that's what the business owner does. It's like, I won't do this. So tell me the ROI. And it's actually, you have to find a place to play.
I think in business, sometimes there is no ROI for a long time, and you investing in it because of the fact that, one, we're in the world of a podcast, and from our perspective, we're not measuring it on ROI. We're measuring on what are we sharing, what content is getting put out there, and who are we helping, who are we connecting to? Because I think this is a great way to connect and meet good people as well, and just reach out. And you really can break down your network pretty quickly and attach onto different people that you may never have got in contact to just from that business hat on. So there are different methods and different thoughts, but that's one thing I found for podcasting is this one of the massive value adds from what I've seen.
Yeah, by far, the networking effect is. I mean, like, to just give you an idea, on Thursday I fly. I mean, I'm literally lucky that we can fly, but flying because a client of ours is shooting a Netflix special, and is like, and when I think about that would have never happened. Client, maybe friend, more is the term, and I think the network as a result of just like, being in the podcasting game. I got invited to be on a board for a castle in Ireland at the end of last year.
Castle in Ireland.
A 500-year-old castle, to be on the board of the, yeah, it's mental. Like, when I think about, our agency does work with Vayner Talent, Vayner Media, all their clients. When I started to break that down, and I started like, last year my TEDx talk got made a TED talk. Like, it's like, what, like, I can't even put into, these, I got made a godfather for the second time as a result of meeting someone on my podcast.
Oh, you're kidding?
Okay. No jokes. No jokes. No jokes. It is absolutely one of the most vital things about a podcast is the relationship building. And I feel like that is kind of misunderstood or misused. But wow, what a connector, what an influence. It's made me the hub, to a bunch of people. Now I've done 1,300 interviews in total, maybe over the last 7-8 years. That's a lot of conversations, a lot of people I've spoken to. So it also allows perspective, man. Like, I thought I was a good listener. Then I started podcasting and I realized I was a bad listener. Then Clubhouse came along and I realized I was a really bad listener. So, it's all perspective. And I think, it's the journey. It's the journey of being an entrepreneur. That's pretty cool.
So in terms of what drives you to do 1,000 interviews? What drives you to continue to go back? What is it? Because I know from business, putting business aside, what's the things that you get from it?
Well, you don't ask a dancer how long they get a chance to dance. They don't say, I've spent the last 2.5 hours dancing. They never say that. They just say, I danced this week, or I did not. And I think for me, who knew it was my voice? I still find I'm flabbergasted by that idea, that it's my voice that makes us the money. It's so weird. But I know that I've been misunderstood growing up. Like, every time I asked a question, I was thought to be questioning authority. So there's this wound and a scar there that I feel like. There's a gentleman called Philip McKernan. He's written a book called One Last Talk. And One Last Talk, basically the premise is, if you had to give one last talk on the planet, what would it be, and what would you say, and who would you say it to? He's got a great quote in that book, and the quote goes like this: your greatest gift lies next to your deepest wound. So I feel like that this voice aspect inside me, like, It opens up channels that I cannot intellectualize. I cannot say this is the ROI I'm getting at. I just feel entirely fulfilled. I absolutely love hearing someone speak up for the first time. Like, I cannot even put into words. I cannot, man. Like, it is
I
just...
get that. It's awesome to see when someone expresses themselves in front of you, right? And they feel like it's this almighty thing that they're coming into in a podcast, and then they come in and that was a great conversation. We just had a chat. I go, yeah, that's all it is. It's just a conversation. We'll dig in and we'll go where it needs to go. And I think people don't get that, but it's great. Yeah, I agree with that 100%.
Yeah, and that's probably it. Like, I have no expectation really out of any interview. I'm keen to just dance for however long it's scheduled for, you know.
the dance of it. So let's talk a bit more tactical. So from Amplify's perspective, how are you managing clients, and then what do you advise them to do in the world of podcasting? Because this is obviously your job, or one of the key aspects of what you do. Let's put it that way, not your job, a key aspect of what you do. And it's maybe a key driver of what you do too, and way you express yourself. That's not in every entrepreneur that a podcast is the way they're going to go and do this, right? So how would you recommend someone looks at a podcast and then makes use of it within their business, within the context of what they're doing?
Yeah, I love this question. And I think this is a great question for me to even remember to ask other people, because I believe, let me start to answer this like this. The maturity of social media for images is so mature that we have to stop our events to click a selfie so we can put it up there. Okay? And us capturing images is not native to us. Voice is native to us. Let me start by saying that, number one. Number two, parents sing to their kids before they're even born. And there's this huge intimacy that comes with voice, and having this connection with someone's voice and the frequencies and the vibration of the voice. Three, audio is the only form of content that you can consume while you're doing other things. Everything else, every other content, you have to stop what you're doing to consume it properly. And I didn't even like this. I'm not even getting to the stats of podcasting and why podcasting has got nothing to do with the word podcast. It's got everything to do with the fact that someone can hear you before they even consider whether you can help them, you can be in business with them, you can do whatever it is with them. And now, you know, I've been doing this for so long. I feel like I've just started, because there've been people that have been doing podcasting for like, you know, donkey's years, and they're like the Mount Rushmore faces of podcasting. And I just feel like I'm a new kid on the block, but I realized that I've been doing it for a while. And when I first started convincing people to start a podcast, I tell this story a lot because I got thrown out of Chamber of Commerce Brisbane. Stephen Tate is the CEO. I mean, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but you know, he literally said to me, business owners have so many problems, Ronsley. Are you telling me a podcast is going to solve them? And I just could not convince him. Funny story, 2.5 years later, we started the Business Over Breakfast podcast, and we did that for Chamber of Commerce. So I tell this story because it's got a happy ending. But the point is, along the journey of pitching to businesses, I would say different things to convince them. But one of the things I would say most recently was, can you imagine what's going to happen when we have social media for audio? Like, can you even think about that is so native to us, and we figure out a way to be social on audio because we've been having telephone calls? Just imagine that going to social media. And last year, that happened. Now, like everyone else, I thought it was a fad, did not do anything. Some of my friends are investors in Clubhouse. I got invited in November, didn't sign up. And then something happened in December, and then I started 75 Hard in January. So I didn't want to go live on video, decided to go live on audio. And I realized that now for a business owner, you can be social with your voice on Clubhouse, capture that, create your Netflix special as your podcast, and then invite people to your sales conversation as a business. Whatever that sales conversation looks like, if it's a partnership, it's a business deal, or whatever that looks like for you. And that is all voice. And you think about opening up conversations on a social media platform, then taking that and then having this really in-depth consumable form of content, which is the podcast, which ultimately leads them into to hear you before they buy from you. I think that's the way you start to think about your business. And you think that I was one of those people who did not want to use emoticons in anything, but fuck, goddamn.
Yeah, I'm probably one of those still.
Yeah.
But anyway, Clubhouse. You mentioned quite a bit there. There's quite a bit of content, but Clubhouse was one of them. But the power of the voice. And I think that you frame that really well. You pair all technology back. Take us back 20, 30, 50 years. All we had was voice. We had nothing else. Visual came in from a TV perspective, but that was just a representation, a flat screen of what we saw in real life. And then it's evolved to text, which I've never really enjoyed doing. It's not natural to a human being to be typing away and sitting on a keyboard every day. So the power of the voice, and it's quite interesting, how you frame that. So yeah, I think there's plenty to take away from that, and what maybe diving into Clubhouse could do for yourself, your business, your podcast.
Well, Clubhouse is a platform. I mean, LinkedIn mentioned they're getting into the live audio, social media for audio. Spotify announced a competitor for Clubhouse. Twitter's already playing in it with Spaces. There's lots of platforms that is social media. Clubhouse, I'm saying Clubhouse because it's the most popular one at this point, even though it's not open to 2/3 of the population yet. Just look at that. Like, look at the signs. That's it. Like, you don't, like, I think we tell ourselves these really crazy stories, but just look at the signs and make up your mind and think about that. It's taken us, 18 or 19 years to get to 1 million podcasts, which happened March last year or February last year. And we've got 2 million podcasts now. So it's doubled in the last 12 months. So just look at what the signs are doing and think whether, voice and audio is for you and whether it'll represent your business. That's all.
So if I'm looking at, and I find it interesting just to go back to one of your comments around comparing that you're the new kid on the block. We've only done 60 episodes, so now I feel really like the new kid on the block. So yeah, you can compare to the top end or the low end. It doesn't matter who you're comparing to, and I think it's just putting it out there, just compare to what you're up to. Just look at it, am I improving at what I'm doing? I think that's where we need to sort of frame it from. Yes, because there's always someone that's done more than us, less than us, and everything in between.
You're right. You're absolutely right. And I think that the reason I bring that up is I feel like there are so many people that have laid the platform for me, to be able to do this. And there were people that were very pure to the podcast game. And there were a lot of people that were deviating. And I had certain people I looked up to, and I stayed pure as much as I could and, did my own version. And I just feel like I don't want them to not be noticed as a result of all this new growth, right? Because they literally were around when this wasn't a cool thing to do.
What do you mean by pure in the context of the podcast game?
Not repurposed audio is probably the simplest way to put it.
Mm.
Okay. Actually hosting a dedicated show, effectively.
Mm-hmm. Get it.
It's very easy to misuse audio. And now when you think about people getting live audio in one space and they can just consume it, there's going to be, let's put it this way, you would never read a book that wasn't edited. You would never read a blog post that was not edited. Why would you listen to a podcast that's not edited? But that's going to change now with the kind of podcast coming out and the people that are putting effort into their podcasts. So it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, it is evolving. We don't edit much of the podcast, if anything.
Just the gaps and the ums and ahs.
Yeah.
The guy doesn't take out just now.
We've chosen to just keep it pure, and I think is that where you're coming from? Yeah, okay. Because it is a conversation, and I think there's a lot of there's okay to have silence, and I think it's just understanding where the person's coming from, and they're in their mind thinking. And I think that's okay, and I don't see a problem with that at all. And I think it's to edit things and create a show out of it, that's another sphere, in my opinion.
Depends what sort of show you're trying to create. Are you creating a scripted, highly polished show, or are you just hosting a conversation where people are learning?
Yeah, I mean,
listen to both types on my own podcast that I listen to.
I think what I was trying to say is sometimes people already have content and they just reuse it, and they think that is a podcast. Now, when you create a show and you have an intent around what the show is and what it's going to do for the audience, there's no purity levels there. Sometimes, like my show, for example, Psychology of Entrepreneurship, there's 40 hours a week that goes into each episode or volume. We call them volumes because it's like so much of work, so much of scripting, narration, audio design, sound design. It's like, and that goes out every week. And literally today we decided to take 4 weeks break because it's been so much of work. We're going to release volume 74, and and that's an evolution of doing so many other shows and going, okay, I don't want to do it this way. I think I can express myself this way, but that's not what I mean by purity. What I mean by purity is thinking that voice and audio isn't important and kind of go, oh, video is more important. I'll do video, and then just repurposing the audio. And I think that the problem there is that it's actually a video show that you've repurposed the audio, as opposed to an audio show that you've just kind of used the video, which is a very different way of looking at it.
Yeah, you're doing the audio, and it needs to serve the purpose and the medium it's written for. Like you said earlier, if you stop to take a selfie, you're stopping to take a photo for that platform. You're not going to then take that, pass it into like an AI thing and write an article saying there's a green tree behind the person to describe the image. Same type of thing.
I understand why you chime in now.
That's the chime in. Very cool. So you mentioned a couple of times we haven't got in anywhere near it really. I'm running a business. People perceive podcasts to be a means of marketing, and that's the reality right now. They perceive it as a way to market, but I sort of coin it from the perspective of the only reason why we started this podcast is we wanted to help people share their stories, their journeys, and what might actually give value back to a community. I think to stand on something when beginning a podcast, I think, yes, if you frame it from a business outcome perspective, it can get a bit grey. I'll tell you a bit about a story of how we started it. We had back in October 2019, and I believe I was actually chatting to you on SMS about starting a podcast at the time, but I'll go into that. It was a pretty funny story. You said, what's your niche? And I said, yeah, this is what it is. So back in 2019, October it was, in a week or two, we had 5 entrepreneurs, business owners that was looking at or building products, so the building tech product, and they were in a position of complete failure. They spent over $1.2 million, complete failure. All write-offs, needed to start again. And Anthony and I were looking at different mediums, and we said, well, why don't we share stories? This is definitely going to help somebody. So the first lady that was on our podcast, Judy Selman, she was one of those 5, and she shared a story, and that was the beginning. And we didn't know what we'll get into. We did one, and thought, all right, let's do another one, and it just evolved.
And then decided to be consistent, and yeah, we're still going.
Yeah.
The thing we normally don't tell people is we were thinking of doing a podcast for about 1 to 2 years before that moment. We just didn't know what we were going to do it on or what the topic was about. Like, all right, we'll do a podcast, but who wants to hear something from us?
So you guys talking about tech.
From us, we're sharing stories. It's not me just telling you super technical things, which is the wrong focus anyway. I'm not hosting a developer podcast.
That's such an important point. I mean, when you think about creation and you think about people, spending money on things that ultimately feel like a waste. I mean, I know you asked me this question at the start and I probably should have answered it, but I didn't have a proper answer. Like, getting into the podcasting game, I came in with $500,000 of debt from my first business that shut overnight, which was a restaurant business. And when I think about putting money into something and hoping that it would return. It's the restaurant, like putting so much money into it and then hoping that it will return. And so you don't have any leeway to move that. If something drastic happens, then you're just stuck with $500,000 in debt or, declare bankruptcy. So I feel like that's such an important part of anyone doing anything in business, is like starting with that initial idea of why you're doing it, for what reason, who is it going to benefit? Is there a market? Is probably the most important one above everything else, is because sometimes, not sometimes, 99% of the time, we think we know what our market wants. And 99% of the time, the market tells us, fuck off, get to know us better.
It's true. Yeah, I think that is the doom of the entrepreneur. It's the challenge. It's, yes, we have an idea, let's just build it and hope someone comes. But speaking to market's important. Understanding who your market is and being around them for a long period of time is very important. Otherwise, we don't know what they want and we don't really understand what they're thinking. So,
so you guys do tech stuff? Is it like developer, like app
software
stuff?
developers, consultants?
So
build.
Fascinating, right? Because I wrote my master's thesis on process quality. I merged rigid process with agile techniques, and it's funny because now agile has come into every project management system, but the principles of agile at the time even were misunderstood as ad hoc. Right. And
they still are.
My whole initial introduction of my thesis was to explain to someone reading the thesis that, wait a minute, agile is not actually ad hoc. And I think that there's this beautiful way that you can do business that's not the rigid way. And it is the agile way where you're repeatedly getting feedback. And I think that's the best way to put it for anyone that's in a tech space, is Agile method works because of the regular, constant feedback between team and customers and stakeholders. That is the reason it works, and that's the reason why it is applied in a lot of project management systems. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. It's the feedback loop. If you're not getting the feedback, and that's the waterfall model where you wait a year to get feedback, and then that year comes and no one wants what you've got, and that's a major issue. And I think agile is, in a way, we probably communicate it is having a vision, having a direction, having a little bit of a plan, but be willing to evolve that and move with it and shift with what comes at you. Because if you're too fixated on where you are and where you're going and there's no movement, that's when trouble hits. And that's when, if you're not engaging with the stakeholders, your clients, and everyone in between, you're not going to get that piece of gold that's going to actually add the value that you're looking to add. Because we're all looking to help in some context, right? And I think the agile methodology, if used in the right frame of reference, can really make a big difference in what you're doing, and can actually create new things as a result of going through that journey.
Yeah, I never thought I'd use that analogy on a podcast. So, that's, it's been so long since, but anyway, I'm glad.
So in terms of, and that's who we're here to help. We're here to help people with ideas, creative people generally. They can be technical people too, but what we've found is those people that come into this world of technology, they can get a little bit lost. They're not sure where to go, where to turn. And they may jump into something way too early before they're DevReady, right, as to the context of what the podcast is about and how we talk about it. The readiness of development is getting to a point where you have really tested some things with clients first. It's not about just jumping right in head first and just building something and hoping for the best. And that's where we stand it from. And it's just educating people on the fact of, in the end, your customers know what they need, but you also have to be there listening and be open to hearing what they're not saying. There's a bit of that in that too, and that's where creativity comes in, and you might be able to add value based on just something you hear in a conversation or the way they're doing things, and you continue to evolve, and that's business 101 really.
Yeah, and that's similar to how you said you approach the podcast, Ronsley. If you don't know what the market wants or your target customers are and what outcomes you've got, you're not going to build the right thing. It's the same thing with software. Just one's a much more costly experience than just sitting in front of a microphone for an hour.
You're right.
If you do want to do it the quick way.
Yeah, you're right.
It can be costly if you want to try to be very professional about it too.
And I think to add on to that story of the $500,000 in debt, because what happened after that was that I had this debt and I had so many jobs, I couldn't keep a job because I was not employable. And I started a podcast, obviously, that got to 1 million listeners in like 4.5 months because it was in the banner section of iTunes. Now, everyone at that point was like, Ronsley, help me start a podcast. Now, I was a chef, right? I was a chef. I had a chef business, and the podcast was about, I've done a bunch of things. Financial advisor, software engineer.
Sounds like you like to try a number of things. Like shiny balls, yeah.
Shiny ball syndrome. But the point is that what happened was when all these people were like, help me start a podcast, Ronsley, I was like, okay, that's interesting. I will take on 8 people, and I'll take 2 people one-on-one, and I'll take 6 in a group. And I put it out onto Facebook. I'm like, all right, all these people have been asking me about a podcast. I'm going to take on 8 people. This is the deal. At the end of the week, I had 32 grand in my account, and I had not built the course yet. This was in 2016. And this is the reason I'm telling you all this, is that this is the most important part of any product market fit, is finding product market fit, is finding the MVP that the market wants and says, can I give you money because I want to solve this problem really badly? Because until that point, like I've had so many failed launches of what I thought was a product that people wanted. And I think that it hurts the ego to fail in a launch 100%, but you can learn so much and not hurt the bank account. I hope that was making sense, because that is such an important point for anyone, whether creative or tech, but especially creatives, because we can spend time creating and help and go. I love creating. If it never goes anywhere and I don't have to make money from it, I'll be like a pig in shit, but the market wants to have to look at my art and say, oh, that's valuable. Let me pay him something for it.
How do you get yourself off the canvas when you're $500 down, $500,000 down? Excuse me, I'll just add the extra zeros on. How do you pick yourself up? Where do you go? Obviously, that's not a great place to be. No one wants to be there, and they'll be challenging both ego, 1, and then 2. You've got, I'm not sure what position you're in, family responsibilities. What do you do? Like, where do you go from there? And then to jumping on podcast. What did you do in that frame? Because I find that quite intriguing as to how you got through that.
Yeah, it's one of the most, I get asked that question the most. But I was 3 months married, so I just got married 3 months in. We did service on Saturday. On Sunday, the locks were changed, and it was lawyers had to get involved. Didn't have money to pay the lawyers to get involved. It was like this catch-22, right? And they didn't let us into the building at all, so I couldn't get any of my grandmother's tablecloths, for example, is something that I really wanted. Luckily, I have a software tech background, so I remotely connected to the computer, removed all the data, wiped off the computer, which was probably the most important thing, I think, in the grander scheme of things. Man, one step at a time, really. I didn't have any courage. My wife lent me a lot of her courage at the time. I think having someone like that around is, extremely helpful, because, if she didn't have that, then who knows, like, it could have gone very badly. And, I don't know, man. I don't know. I think it was just one small step after the other, trying to make this little thing work. And you know what? I did 18 of those trainings that I was talking about, 18 times to pay out this loan, and this debt, which took us 2 years and a month to clear, to go to zero. And it was because, of this training thing, doing it so many times. And as a result, I started the first podcasting conference, We Are Podcast, in 2015. As a result of that, in 2016, the agency started. In 2017, we signed the first deal with Amazon with the library of sound to upload to Audible for the next 10 years. Like TEDx talk, that is mental. That I can't even, I don't know. I don't know.
So one step at a time, and you don't know where you're going to be, and what's around the corner, do we? I think we, as people, we can get stuck in one place, and in a world of pain, I would imagine at that time it wouldn't be very comfortable being in that surrounding. But there is another way. There might be another mold and another thing for you, and things happen for a reason. And that one person or those 8 people that asked the question about how do I start a podcast has set you on a chain, and for you to have the openness to dig in and just say, yeah, let's try this. And I think giving something a go is probably one of the biggest things that's got you to where you are today. You could have just closed in and said, no, I do podcasts on my own. I don't teach podcasts. But I think it's just an interesting story how you got to the point of, all right, let's just put a Facebook post out. And that Facebook post has changed the whole direction of where you are now. It's pretty crazy, really.
It is. I mean, when you put it that way, I mean, there's a lot of things that I look back, because the other day I was thinking of the fact that I've been a best man for 7 people. And I find that mental when I I didn't realize that until my wife's like, you realize that is not normal, right? And, I don't know, man, I just feel lucky. I feel blessed, really. I feel that, any entrepreneurial journey is going to have these points. Like, I think I'm a way better entrepreneur now, a better person, a better husband for sure, because I could lean on my wife, and I didn't have the male sort of, I got to provide. It was not given to me. I didn't have that option. I just had to lean and learn to accept where I was. And that's a big lesson to learn, man. Like, to just understand that this is the cards you have. You don't have any more cards. Just play.
Yeah. And I think the choices that you made are clearly good ones. People can go in all sorts of directions being in that position. And, it's tough, but I think just one step at a time is what you said is probably the only way you can get through that, right? But I think that's the context of everything too. And I think we overcomplicate everything. Doesn't matter what position we're in, it's still one step at a time, right? You can't build, Rome wasn't built in a day, as the old saying goes, but one step at a time to build anything. And I think the journey will evolve as it has for you.
Yeah, I mean, people, would say, Amplify, what a great success. Amplify became $1 million company in 9 months, but it took 11 years to get to that point.
No one ever sees the before bit.
They never see that at all.
Lionel Messi had a quote like that, and they asked him, so overnight success when he first got signed for, was it Barcelona? And he's like, yep, 19 years in the making.
Yeah. It's all practice. It's all, and that's the thing about that failure at that time would have given you a good grounding, and you would have learnt something from it. What's some of the learnings from that specific point in time that you'll take away?
Or belief in myself really is a big one. Like, I feel, like entrepreneurs get into entrepreneurship for different reasons. Sometimes I went from one achievement to the other, trying to prove something to someone that I always had his approval or their approval. Like, it was weird for me to even think that I didn't have it, but I didn't appreciate any of my accomplishments really at all until I started to understand that, I couldn't give anyone anything I didn't have. So how could I give someone belief? How could I lead a team and give them belief if I didn't have belief in myself? And learning that, and even being able to express that in a way that someone else can understand that very simply, and they can go and implement that very straight. Like, I didn't think of that before I came into this conversation. It just came from somewhere, and it sounds right. And I hear it and I go, wow, that sounds right. it's not necessarily me. It's just a combination of different people that have told me different things and it came out that way. You know what I mean? But that belief that I didn't have to prepare for this necessarily for this to be meaningful, or, I just self-belief in all my reps that I can just come here and my reps are done. I'm just playing, and whatever I can enjoy this game. So, I just feel lucky, man. Extremely.
It comes through you, that's for sure. Game, you framed it as a game because it is a game. I think we're all on a game and on a journey, and it's going to end at some point, and no one knows when, right? And I think we take it way too bloody seriously. I can do that. We all can do that. Sometimes just having a bit of fun in the moment is very important. I think that's probably one thing that I've gotten out of podcast is it's fun. It's chatting to Ronsley on a what is it? I don't even know what day it is. It's a Tuesday afternoon, sitting in Melbourne in my house, and it's you get to have a bit of fun and just have a conversation around what's exactly. So I think there's plenty of learning in it all. For the person listening out there, the non-tech building tech, they're in a position where they're going through a lot of learning evolution using agile methodologies, we hope, in some context. Not that ad hoc model though, but when you talk about podcasts, and I sent you a message on Facebook, it was probably when we started the podcast, you said, who's your niche? Who are you targeting? Who are you trying to help? I didn't have an answer at that point. So that's when I think Anthony mentioned it. We were looking to start a podcast for a few years. And I think, sometimes that comes to you. Sometimes we don't have to force things on us. But what would you recommend if someone really wants to go on this journey of sharing their voice, letting it out there, talking to their community, to their clients, to their network, whatever it might be? What would you recommend? Where would they start? How would they just take the step and the plunge, really?
Well, it doesn't have to be a plunge, Andrew, because when I think about the institutions that have educated us and have installed what they call discipline in us, the institutions that have made us do certain things, those institutions did not tell us to raise our voices. It did not tell us to question authority. It did not tell us to have our own thought. So we're already, from that standpoint, we're kind of like, there's this baggage that comes with using our voice, which is very, very important to realize. And the other thing is, we all want to make an impact on the planet, and we all want to look good while we make that impact. And it never is the case where that happens. So I would say that this is what I would say. My ancestors and your ancestors did not have the ability to speak their mind. They did not have the ability to turn something on and be heard by people from all over the planet about their thoughts and their ideas and their point of view and their perspective. And I think just based on that alone, we owe our ancestors a lot for the platform they've given us. They've given us a huge platform that we don't have to worry about safety as much, especially in Australia. God damn. Think about that. And then you think about the fact that you have this freedom of speech and you have the ability to make a stand and you have the ability to say something from an educated standpoint or from a perspective or from a perspective of shining a light on something that you care deeply about. And I think if you just place that in perspective, there's no necessarily a need to be heard and feel like you're respected because of the thoughts you put out. That's not what a podcast, it's not about that. So it's about using your voice, hearing your voice, and then refining your argument as a result of that.
There's plenty in that, and I think we are in an interesting predicament or a position right now as a culture society. We have so much in front of us. We have the ability to jump online, automate so many different things in our world, in our lives. We have access to a VA overseas that can do things in terms of what we might need. We have access to people all over the world. We have expanded our network as a result of what's going on through COVID. It's quite interesting. I think the world's come closer. We have clients now in Singapore, speaking to a guy out of Italy next week, the US, and we were just a Melbourne company a year and a half ago. And I think it's just allowed us to open up. And I think I agree that we're blessed in terms of what we have in front of us. And putting a podcast together, it's not about what comes out. I think it's more about who you're connecting with and the conversation that you're on, and just being in that. That's what I find a podcast is, and the value that you can add. Hopefully someone listening can take something from it. That's really all I jump into it for.
And you asked me a question earlier, Andrew, about how do you take courage, when you're down. I think that having Bon Appetit, because I used to release Bon Appetit 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I did everything on my own. And I genuinely believe that my conversations with people would shift my energy ever so slightly, because they were different, right? I was not in my victim hole of $500,000 in debt or $500,000 in debt. I was like, every time there was this conversation, my energy and my perspective was being shifted. And I think that slowly shifted me out of my little hole that I was in.
Interesting. And I don't know if I've mentioned it to Anthony, that's probably the most enjoyable thing out of the podcast. It's the energy shift. I get that too. Every time I have a conversation, and it doesn't matter who it is, they always engage me, intrigue me in a certain way. It changes mindset. And I think that, and you mentioned it right at the beginning, the entrepreneurship, it's a journey, it's an evolution, and it's a learning, and we're evolving in this space. And I think for me, a podcast can allow you to evolve 10 times further and quicker and faster, because you're connecting on a different level and you're having different conversations and you're asking different questions. And if you are looking to add value, and when I got into it, it was all about just how do we help. But then there's the selfishness of me saying, I'm going to learn a lot out of this conversation. And that's just being in that and enjoying that is probably the best part about the podcast, really.
Yeah, 100%.
You wouldn't want to do it if that wasn't there.
No, I wouldn't be involved in it every day. And driving,
you have to take something out of whatever you're doing, otherwise you're not going to be doing it for long.
Yeah, it's enjoy it, right? So there's an enjoyment factor in it, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So going back to Ronsley, whenever your career started, what sort of advice would you give him on the journey from what you've learnt now? What are 2 or 3 takeaways that you would say, start here, or think about this first? What are some of the things that you would reflect on to Ronsley of 20 years ago, wherever that might be?
I don't know whether that Ronsley would understand even. It's like, I think that information comes to you at the right time. And I don't think that, like when I tell you this story right now, you might think that, oh, wow, it's not like you made good, like you even said that you made good decisions. God damn, no, I did not. It sounds like a great story because we're connecting the dots looking backwards. There's a great Steve Jobs quote about that. And it sounds like a great story because we are humans and we create these, there's a connection here, there's a connection there, there's a connection there. And it sounds fascinating. And, I'm a keynote speaker. I use these things. And obviously it comes out like it's great. But holy shit, I've made some bad decisions in my life. God damn. And I think that because social media and because these conversations, and a lot of the times we don't talk about, the times we're in fetal positions. We don't talk about the times that things are extremely hard and you've hit a wall. We don't talk about the time that we almost canceled this interview because I literally on Easter Sunday hit a brick wall and we canceled a lot of the other things for this week and the start of next week just to give me breathing space because I don't know how to take a break. People have to tell me.
It almost got cancelled from both ends. I've got a head cold I'm holding at the moment. I was in bed this morning, but I got up and said, we rescheduled it once. We've got to do the podcast. And it's lifted me up this afternoon, which is awesome.
Right.
Yeah.
right? So there's all these conversations that don't get heard, and we only see the highlight reel on social media, and we feel like we got to compare our lives to that, and it's not the case at all. Like, we're all have our own shit to deal with, really.
So if you were to go back, you just would say it's going to be a rocky road. Expect that, learn from it, and evolve from it. And that's probably what I'd take from it.
I actually believe that my 21 years in Australia has been the absolute holiday. Like, it's been the best ride. It's been such I don't know. It's been opportunity after opportunity. I didn't realize I was a person of color until last year. I didn't realize that that my voice as an Australian or a new Australian even mattered, like, at all, until last year. So there's all these really interesting factors that come into play when you start to, like, understand that every human's going through their own journey, and, it's just so vital to have these conversations and feel like, you're not alone, and it's not only happening to you, it's not only in your head. It's like we're all, like, a bit messy or a bit fucked up, I suppose.
There's a battle inside, that's for sure. Yeah, they do. Yeah, it's that battle, right? And it's the toing and throwing. It should I, shouldn't I? It's the questioning. It's the reflecting on the. We don't reflect on the good so much. We generally ponder and sit in the shit, as you would call it, a lot more as human beings. So I think there's plenty in it, and I think we're all on a path and a journey. But the key takeaway for me from this chat is use your voice, share your story, and whatever it might be, you're adding value to whoever is around you, but you're also just expressing yourself. And I think the podcast allows you to express yourself in a different way, and it gives you a different frame of reference as to how you might communicate, and it just changes maybe your vision of who you could become as well. I see a podcast doing to myself in terms of who it is, even what it is for me.
I actually will add to that, Andrew, and I'll say that just based on what I've never actually thought of this before until right now, I feel like just based on what I said before and what was said through this whole conversation, the structures that have been built for us to not raise our voice and not to say what we care about, right? So our previous generation doesn't know how to train the next one to do it. So it's super important for us to do it so we can teach the next generation how to do it proper. And I think that is, like, I've never thought of it that way, but I think that gives me even more motivation to learn how to do it and learn how to say something in a way that it's okay for someone to say, but I don't think that. I think it's like this. Why not? It's okay. I don't have to be the expert, and I don't have to get it right all the time.
And I think that's important, to educate and help others that come beneath us or after us, but also, I'm talking like I'm in the same breadth of you, but nowhere near that. But after that, I think it's important that we reflect on our own growth patterns and who we're becoming to. And I think, to sharing out your stories is important. And I think, that's definitely one thing that I'll take away from this, and sharing voice. And you said you don't have to be the expert, and that's definitely for sure. You don't have to stand on a pedestal and share it all out. And I think but there's so much to learn from others within our network.
Yeah, Totally couldn't agree more.
In terms of Amplify, tell us in a good 5 minutes, what is Amplify? Why is it so important? Why would someone want to engage with a business like Amplify to pretty much amplify what they're up to, really, from what I'm gathering? Great name, by the way.
Thank
Classic.
you. It's actually built on the book I wrote called Amplify, which is a 7-step framework, AMPLIFY. So it's all interlinked, and it's the 7 steps is what we implement in people's businesses. And the Amplify framework brings together 3 main aspects, which is marketing foundations, which podcasts miss before they build a podcast. Then is the podcast, which is launching audio, which is the highest form of engagement than any other piece of content. And then is a sales machine, which is super important for a business to take the marketing foundations, build the audio from there, and then tack on a sales machine so that delivers an audio marketing machine for the business. Now, our clients are like, some of the most coolest people on the planet, from like actors, politicians, influencers. It's just, they do some incredible work, and they do some, incredible things around on the planet. So we specialize in just making sure that the important voices are heard, and they're heard by the right people, and it has to be sustainable. It has to be a way for us to get a return on that. So it's all part of the framework. It's a book I wrote in 2016 that is used in a lot of businesses, and people use the framework to implement into their businesses. So if you're looking to do that, then I'm sure you can get it on Amazon. I'm pretty sure it's on Amazon.
Better find it on Amazon. Yeah, we'll put it in the note of the episode as it goes out. So definitely share it out in terms of the book itself. So, Ronsley, it's been a pleasure having you on and just talking all things podcast, a bit about your journey, your history, how you got to where you are now, and touching upon Amplify and what it's doing for the community and who you're helping serve and get their voice out. And I think it's pretty important stuff in terms of where I'm sort of sitting. So if anyone's looking to start a podcast, I think probably the book might be the best place to start from the Amplify for reference. But is there any other ways that they might work with you moving forward, or want to, if they're looking to start a podcast, what would would they get involved with Amplify itself, or would the book be the first point of call?
Well, even before the book, you can just go to shouldistartapodcast.com and start there.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ronsley. Thanks for joining us. We'll share out all your links in the show notes. Really appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Thanks, boys. It's a pleasure.